Hey, it's Clayton here from howtodrawcomics.net and bartonbrostudios.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to draw an ear. Specifically, we're going to focus on the side view of the ear, which is going to give us a really good look at the shape and the anatomy of the human ear. Now, if you'd like to know more about how to draw ears from the front view, from the back view, a very difficult view since we don't often see it a whole lot, and also those more dynamic angles from the top down and bottom up perspectives, then I highly suggest that you check out the full class that this lesson is actually a part of. It's available on howtodrawcomics.net and Skillshare, which I've got links to in the description below. But for now, let's just jump straight into this tutorial. Let's begin with the side view. Why are we beginning with the side view of the ear instead of the front view? Well, it's because the side view of the ear is actually the best representation that we're going to get of how its anatomy looks. Okay, it's kind of a flattened out diagrammatic presentation of the interior ear anatomy. And once we know what that consists of, well, it becomes much, much easier to be able to take that particular viewpoint of the ear and start to foreshorten it at different angles. Okay, so let's start out with that. Now, the basic ear shape is what I like to draw first. Okay, so I'll actually, because this helps me to figure out how large the ear is going to be in the first place. So I'll draw that out. And what you'll notice is that it's basically almost an upside down pear. So if you were to put a little outline around it, looks like an upside down pear. Or you could also think of it like a light bulb, right? I'll draw a little diagram over to the side here. And draw a red outline around it too. Okay, so that's the basic shape of the ear that we're dealing with. Okay, cool. So once we've got the outline of the ear established, and I've drawn that in very, very lightly. Hopefully you can see what I've done there. What we can then do is start to draw in what I like to refer to as the interior frame. The interior frame of the ear, it looks, well, it looks a little bit like a question mark. And here's what I mean. All right, it's going to hook into the ear at the front. And it's going to run up and follow along the shape of the ear that we established earlier. And by the way, if you do this repeatedly enough times, you'll just remember it off by heart. It's going to run back toward back of the ear and then down into the ear lobe. Okay. Now, what you're left with at this point is almost what looks like a fish hook, at least to me, right? So get this sort of fish hook like appearance. Right, so that's the shape that we're dealing with now. But the actual line that we've just drawn, well, it looks a bit like, as I said before, it looks a bit like a question mark. Okay, so that's an easy way to remember it. So once we've made it to this point, we're then going to go ahead and place in the interior of this piece of cartilage that we've started to draw out. I call it the Y-shaped piece of cartilage. It could also be described as something that looks like a chicken bone or like a wishbone. But again, you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So we'll pull that out from the front of the ear and then draw it down into the base, hook it up, and then around into the ear hole covering. Right? So it's probably the most confusing portion when drawing the ear. Let me just fill that in there. Okay, so we can't forget the ear hole. We got to put that in there. Otherwise, there would be no purpose to all this complicated anatomy that sits around it. And once we've got that drawn in, well, we've got another little piece of cartilage that we can bring in once again to the ear here. But for the most part, that's pretty much it. The only other thing that we need to add in is this little dip at the top of the Y-shaped piece of cartilage. And this is why it looks like the letter Y. Because once we divide it at the top, with this little pocket, this little indentation, that's pretty much what it looks like. Is the letter Y. Or it could look like a twig, right? So it might look like this. Or again, as I said, like a wishbone is another way that you could think about it. You know, whatever is the easiest metaphor for you to remember. I always like to associate different aspects of a drawing to real world things, because for me it makes it easier to remember, and hopefully it'll make it easier for you to remember as well. Okay, so we got the shape of the ear overall that we start off with, and then we've got the interior anatomy, which is the complicated part, the messy part of the process. But if we can get that right, this is really the hardest view of the ear that you're going to end up having to draw. Because all the other ones are just, well, they're foreshortened representations of this, squashed representations of this. So we'll label this. So this is the side of the ear. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and that you got a ton of value out of it. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the lesson that you just watched is actually part of a much larger class that focuses specifically on drawing ears from all sorts of different angles. So if you'd like to know more about that, then I highly suggest you check out the full class via the links in the description below. It is both available on howtodrawcomics.net and Skillshare. Until next time, keep drawing.